Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me here on Wealth Protector TV. Really excited to have Tom Frisina on with me today, who is an executive coach and board member with a very distinguished career and doing some fantastic work right now with owners and executives across the country. Tom, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Fantastic. Well, want to jump right into this, Tom. You and I have talked offline. You've done some amazing things in your career. I want you to give us a bit of a background on your career, and then we're going to talk about what you're doing now and get into what I'm really excited about to hear more of is the 5 horizons. So a little bit about your background.
Okay, and hello everybody. I've been around longer than most. I started working after I got out of the Navy. I am a vet in 1970. And I've started multiple companies in that ensuing 30 or 40 or 50 years. Plus, I had a major role as kind of a co-founder, along with many others, in the video game industry, of which I'm still not only acquainted, but attached. And so my specialization initially was sales and marketing, and I grew over time in the various roles until I became the CEO of a personal robot company, like an R2-D2 personal robot in 1982. That was my first CEO job. So I became a leader at that point in my career, and I have been a successful leader and motivator of people both working with me, for me, and around me. And then when I left the video game industry about 5 years ago, I decided to do that full time. And now I am a professional coach to those who desire a greater path to personal and professional success. So what I do is, when I'm around them, Paul, I get them to where they want to go more quickly and with greater impact when they arrive.
Yep. No, fantastic. And didn't along the way you also serve as a professor at USC? You spent some time there?
Yes. When I was in the video game industry, I was a professor at USC for about 8 years, teaching a business and marketing class on interactive digital media, which is a fancy way of saying the video game business.
Right.
So that was a very fun job for me to have. I'm still in touch with many of my students who have grown up in the industry, and I've helped many of them get to where they are right now. They're all contributing, not as students, but as deliverers of value, which pleases me very greatly.
Tom, you'll probably get a kick out of this, but whenever video games are mentioned, I always think back to when I was a kid and going to the local convenience store to play Frogger and Asteroids on the machine there. You remember those?
Easily do I remember those, because my sons, who were all in their 40s, kind of grew up with those too when they were 3, 4, 5, and 6. So yeah, that's how it started. And then Atari came around in 1976 with Nolan Bushnell as the founder. And that kind of made everything a little more official moving forward.
Yeah, interesting. I always hear an interesting stat about Atari that at one point they were one of the largest makers of computers, I think, with Commodore, and then both went away after a while.
That's exactly right, Paul. The IBM PC, the Commodore 64, and the Atari 4 and 800, those were the preeminent home computers until the Apple II came out in 1981, which kind of eclipsed them a bit going forward. But yes, that's pretty much where the games business started, on home personal computers.
Interesting. Well, now, Tom, you are doing some really interesting things with owners. Obviously, we have a crisis going on right now. So tell me a little bit about your practice now. And then I want to get into the 5 horizons, where, as you say, the 5 R's, they all start with R, which really deal with how businesses can get through the period we're dealing with right now. So can you jump in a bit to that?
Sure. My native business as an advisor and coach to budding entrepreneurs, CEOs, and other executives that want to go farther, faster. That remains intact. So I'm still doing that kind of work. But as a result of what's been going on in our world in the last number of months, I've had to expand my point of view to help people whom I know, or even those that I don't. Many of your watchers or listeners don't know me. And I'm going to offer them some rather succinct advice over the next 4 or 5 minutes, if they'll listen up, please, in terms of what I think you can do to prepare to back in business and have some greater impact once this thing resolves itself. So for your consideration, here's my expression of what a company leader should be doing to protect, invigorate, and motivate their staff and customer base as they prepare for and move forward on kind of a fresh launch when they get back into business.
Great.
It has to do with the 5 horizons as I see companies moving forward, and they all happen to start with R, quite by coincidence. Number 1, resolve. You should address immediately challenge to staff and customers to invigorate their beliefs in supporting your company. Things that have become shaky over the last many weeks that they notice since lockdown need to be gradually addressed, but adroitly addressed, just to convince them that you are going to be okay and worthy of their consideration. Number 2 is resilience. Focus on near-term cash flow management, the most critical element of businesses going forward right now. And when I say near-term cash flow management, I'm referring to, in your cash flow, paying for and being prepared to support only those things that you must have between now and the end of the year. And that goes for resources, certain staff members, and other things that you are going to call upon to implement this reinvigorated company of yours. Be very careful not to overextend that, and if anything, just be very, very conservative about that cash flow.
And Tom, is there, when you say work on cash flow, is that the owner of the business getting in there by him or herself and doing that, or is it getting management together with the owner and sort of having a SWAT team look at the cash flow?
Okay, so if it's really medium or large size businesses, it's the CEO and the chief financial officer, the CFO. And if there is an operating officer, the COO also, they should gather together in the room and map out together the general constraints in which they want to operate going forward. And then once they come to some conclusions, they want to invite certain key members of the staff that they're going to be keeping in to share that with them. That's a very careful and predictable way of protecting themselves in terms of what's going to happen and what we don't know is going to happen in the next number of weeks and months.
Got it. Love it.
So,
Okay.
Okay, great. Number 3 is return. Getting back to the original scale you were in quickly. So initiate staff protections within the office space, and I'm talking about health protections, but make sure that you also emphasize customer support with enhanced CRM. That's consumer relationship management. Anybody involved with marketing knows that. It's going to be very, very critical in messaging out to people who have supported you in the past that you are here and you're going to be providing value to them going forward.
When you say initiate staff protections, I'm looking at my notes here within the office space. Do you mean kind of like spacing issues, mask issues? I mean, things related to the virus, that sort of?
Yes, it's related to that, and it has to be under discretion of the particular philosophy of the gal or guy that runs the business. I am not a fearful leader. I like to push people, but I don't want them getting infected. So I want my staff in front of me rather than virtual if I can help it, for a variety of reasons. Virtual is helpful, as I'll get to that in a minute. But I'd rather have them on staff where they can see one another, and maybe we have fewer people involved right away, and we have staff meetings where we're sitting 4 or 5 or 6 feet apart. You know, I can deal with that kind of stuff, but it has to be respected and responded to in terms of the return to getting back to the original scale quickly. It's related to that.
Got
Number
it. Okay.
4 is reinvent. I hope it doesn't happen, but you need a robust contingency plan just in case business as usual fails to resonate with people that matter to you in the current climate. So I can't describe for you what that should be, but you will know what it should be, and you may never have to implement it, but it needs to be on your desk and ready to initiate if in fact things don't go as planned.
Do you mean with clients and prospects that things don't go as planned with them?
Yes, I'm talking about strategy and mission. It may need to be tweaked based on the attitudes of people and what's going on with politics and government, which I'm going to get to here on the next one, number 5. So you just have to be prepared that it may not be business as usual, even though you're going to be prepared and there and ready to deliver really good quality stuff. It may not be consumable to the rate that it was before because of circumstances that exist in the market.
Okay.
Number 5, the last R, is reform. So the company participation in a new regulatory environment, if it materializes, and it's a strong if. It may not materialize, but you just never know. And it could be central government, or it could be state government and governors, or it could be local government within the counties. You just never know how people are going to react running those parts. And therefore, you have to be prepared if it materializes. And the consequence of that happening is you've got to create stringent defenses within your competitive sphere to make sure that your company operates in a secure position and for its mission in protecting itself against competitors that are doing the same thing that you and I are doing right now. You don't know that the competitors are going to be behaving the way they did before, or even if they're going to be the same based on reinvent and reform, numbers 4 and 5. So you just have to be prepared for that in case it should happen. Do all of this with confidence. Make it virtual where applicable, but don't substitute virtual when you can have people working in close proximity to one another, relatively close proximity. You can see their faces, their expressions, how they react to stuff. You cannot do that very well virtually.
So you're not a big advocate of working virtually.
If it can be avoided, I would prefer it not. Because as a leader, when I need to reach out and see somebody's expression, I need to see the way that they react to what I'm telling them in person. I need to see the way they react to their compatriots within the company and the general dynamics of running the company. I run companies by getting up and walking around. Only about 3% of the CEOs in the world do that. Oh, I'm too busy, or I don't like it, or they don't want to see me that much, which is a bunch of bullshit. Yep. People love to see the leader walking around and taking an interest. If we have time, I can give you one brief example. I don't know if we have time.
Of course we do, yes.
Okay. Well, if we have time, here's an example. So a CEO who does not behave the way that I just suggested, which is like 95 to 97% of them, decides one day, because somebody's pushing him to do it, and it could be a her, of course, they get up out of their chair and they walk into a cubicle and they sit down and they know a little bit about the person that's there, and they sit back and they cross their legs and say, so how's it going? And of course, the person's going to say, oh, things have never been better. We're ahead of schedule. The budgets are